Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob, and if you are looking to have a spooky time, it's time to look at the Nighthaunt faction rules that have been released by Games Workshop on their Warhammer community site. I have been discussing this for a couple of hours with the Twitch chat, and if you ever want to join me Monday through to Friday, where we're talking about Age of Sigmar and a bunch of other stuff on Twitch, then please do join us. But right now, we are going to look at the rules that they have showcased for Nighthaunt, and as always, I would love you to leave loads of comments, because I love to know what you think about it. It's a really nice counterpoint for how I feel about stuff, and that's why I love doing this live with the Twitch chat, who love to throw out a wololo when they can, because that means I get to have a little bit of a conversation with everyone, and that feels really good because we're a big community. Okay, so Nighthaunt players, tell me how you feel about all of these rules for your army in 4th edition. If you're new to Age of Sigmar, I'll just start out again by saying, if you buy or collect a Nighthaunt army, 3D print Nighthaunt army for all I care. If you have a Nighthaunt army, then what happens is you have special rules, which are your battle traits, and this will apply to your whole army. You'll also have something called a battle formation. There'll be 4 battle formations at release. We'll talk about those in a moment, and they will be your sub-faction rules, which will apply to your army as well. But those are things you choose at your army list. So, whole rule-wise, let's talk about the battle traits. So the first one is a passive, and that is ethereal. You ignore all modifiers to save rolls, positive and negative, for friendly Nighthaunt units, excluding Nagash. This means that you won't be affected by Rend, and it's one of the strengths of the Nighthaunt army, in addition to the fact that it seems like every war scroll we've seen has got a 6-up ward save, and in addition, every war scroll we've seen has got fly, which makes sense because they're spooky ghosts. So that means you are going to be able to charge over units, move around terrain, do all sorts of fun stuff, and be much more mobile because you have the fly keyword. You'll be that much more survivable because of the ward save, and ethereal means you'll be able to ignore all of that tasty rend. A lot of units, there's always this really fun counterplay in Age of Sigmar where you have a heavily armored unit, so people bring big units with rend, and then they go up against you, the Nighthaunt player, and then that rend means nothing, which is super fun. So that is ethereal, and it's a great rule to have. In addition, you have a command ability built into your battle traits, which obviously costs 1, and you use this in reaction to an attack ability your opponent chooses. So if they choose to shoot you or they choose to fight you, and then use this on a Nighthaunt unit, obviously, and they get a ward save of 5+. So you go from a 6-up ward save to a 5-up ward save. So this could be really good and very effective for making your army even more survivable, or your key unit. You also have this ability called Wave of Terror, which is done once per turn in your army, and it's done in your charge phase. What this does is a friendly Nighthaunt unit that are in combat, so if you're in combat with an enemy unit, you can use a charge ability this phase. However, if a unit that is in combat uses a charge ability and the charge roll is 3 or less, that unit does not count as having charged this turn. Now, this is a big deal. And the reason this is a big deal is because what they used to have is retreat and charge. So you would move out of combat and you would charge again. What this means is you can literally do a charge while you're in combat, which is crazy because that means you could charge between 2 units. So you could be in combat with 1 unit and charge over to another unit, as long as you fulfilled the stipulations of what the charge ability means, which get within half an inch of a visible unit. Also means you could charge the unit you're currently in combat with and get into a better position, which is also nice as well. Don't forget, when you charge in Age of Sigmar, you do not declare a target for your charge, and instead you just roll 2d6 normally. There are sometimes abilities that let you roll more dice, but you roll 2d6 and then you have to move up to the maximum of the amount you rolled. So if you roll 10, you can move up to 10, and you have to end within half an inch of an enemy visible unit. It's very cool. It's going to mean this army is so mobile, very difficult to use. You can only use it once, though, per turn for your army in your charge phase. So aren't going to be able to use it with the counter charge command ability in your opponent's turn, and it's only going to be 1 unit. So there are some heavy restrictions on it, but it will be indeed very, very spooky. So those are the 3 main abilities. And then you have 3 abilities which are again done in your charge phase, but are locked to certain units. One is locked to war machines and cavalry, one is locked to heroes, and one is usable by any Nighthaunt unit. And if you use any of the other abilities, then that unit then still can't use one of the other auras of dread. So Shriek, Stun, and Petrify, one unit can never use both unless there ends up being a character or a special rule that lets you. So what do? Cool. You can do Shriek, and you declare a Nighthaunt unit that has not used an Aura of Dread, which is one of the other two. And then that unit needs to have charged this turn, and you need to pick an enemy within 1 inch of this target, and the number of models in your Nighthaunt unit need to outnumber the number of models in the enemy unit that you charged, and you can get -1 to hit against them, which is always nice, -1 to hit, especially when you want to make your army that much more survivable. Then you've got Stun, which can only be done by Nighthaunt War Machine, which has got tongues wagging in the Honest Wargamer Twitch chat. Will there be a Nighthaunt War Machine? What will that look like? Will that look like a ghost cannon? No one knows. And you've also, or a cavalry unit. And then as long as you haven't tried to do Shriek or Petrify, then you're going to be able to use this ability when you charge, and you pick an enemy unit within 1 inch of your charging unit, and that unit -1 to their save rolls for the target unit. And that is really good because obviously that is going to stack with Rend. So this means you're going to be able to really punch through a unit, but this does mean you're going to have to bring cavalry in your army or a war machine. They've also got Petrify, which is another ability, same stipulation, can't use the other abilities with the same unit, and it's done with a hero. If you charge a unit and you end up within 1 inch of them, that unit is going to have Strike Last. So across your army in one charge phase, and it's all in your charge phase, so none of these abilities are going to be able to be used in your opponent's turn when you can do counter charge. This is only going to be done in your turn. You're going to be able to make a unit -1 to hit, a unit -1 to save, and a unit strike last, as long as you fulfill all the stipulations. And that's quite good, especially for a purely, or pretty much combat-heavy army. Being able to make units strike last is very effective. Like that a lot. I think that's very good. Next up, we're going to look at the battle formations, and we found out that there are going to be 4 battle formations. The ones that they've talked about, other battle formations let you transport entire hosts of spirits across the battlefield with vanishing phantasms. That's one of them. You enlist the Hunters of the Accursed to sap the souls from enemy heroes with your own champions. And should you prefer to cluster your geese around a chilling aura of a black coach, the Procession of Death uses malign magic to bolster their durability. And I do like the idea of a black coach being brought into the game a little bit more than it previously has done. They've never really found a way to make it work very well, so I'd love to see that. But the one they have shown off, or the sub-faction they've shown off, is Deathstalkers. And the effect of this is that friendly Nighthaunt units can use charge abilities even if they use run or retreat abilities in the same turn. And in addition, no mortal damage is inflicted on friendly Nighthaunt units by retreat abilities, because when you do retreat, you do take mortal damage. So this is going to make this unit much faster on the tabletop. Run and retreat, counter charge, that's going to be so good. So you can retreat out of combat still and counter charge. So even if you don't want to use the ability to charge charge while you're in combat, you can retreat and charge. So it's a good sub-faction. Makes your army that much faster. The one I'm excited about, though, is the one with the black coach. I think that's really fun. Now, they've also shown off a spell as well. Don't forget, if first time you've tuned in and you don't know how spells work in Age of Sigmar 4, when you write your army list, you'll choose a spell law and also a manifestation law or an incarnate. And also don't forget that Nighthaunt have a cool set of endless spells that you can pick up. And the spell law that you choose is the Law of the Underworlds, which is cool. Insert, the Undertaker theme tune here. And the spell that they've shown off is Shade Mist. It's cast on a 6. Every wizard in your army, when you choose a spell law for your army, every wizard in your army can choose spells to cast from that spell law. You no longer choose a spell for your individual wizard. So you have one wizard, they'll know all the spells from the spell law, but will only be able to cast based on their power level, which is at the bottom of their war scroll. Unless there is the unlimited keyword, in which case multiple wizards are going to be able to cast the same spell multiple times. Otherwise, there's a stipulation you can only cast each spell once per turn. And Shade Mist is an unlimited spell. So multiple wizards can cast this multiple times. However, the same wizard can't cast it more than once. So I hope that helps. And what you do is you pick a friendly Nighthaunt wizard to cast his spell. You pick a visible friendly Nighthaunt unit that has 3 or more models and is wholly within 12 inches of them to be the target. And you subtract -1 to wound rolls or attacks that target that unit until your next turn. So obviously this is going to work on Nagash or even a Black Coach because they're single models. But most of your big units are going to be able to be -1 to be wounded, and that is really good, especially as we know we're already potentially getting -1 to hits as well, so that's going to make your units even more survivable. So it's going to be it feels very much so far like it's going to be a debuff army, making your army not work that well, ignoring your rend, feels very good. This also applies when we start looking at Lady Olynder. Lady Olynder is the titular character of the Nighthaunt. She's the Mortarch of Grief, so she's one of Nagash's lieutenants. She has 7 health with a 4-up armor save, but don't forget you can never rend that, so it's always going to be a 4-up, which is pretty good. And she also has a 4-up ward save. She's going to be very survivable. She's also a 2-cast wizard. She's unique, which means you can only take 1 copy of her in an army. She's also got the War Master keyword, which as of yet we don't know what that means. Okay. So she has a couple of abilities, a unique spell, and in addition, she has some pretty good combat profiles or attack profiles. She has a ranged weapon called Horrifying Visage, which we, for a long time, called the Gussie, because she lifted up her veil, no one said which one, showed that to the enemy, and then they would take some damage. That's 12-inch range. She moves 8 inches, so that's going to be 20-inch range, which is pretty good. It's only one hit, but it's only one shot, but it hits on a 2, wounds on a 2, is Rend 3, which is incredible, and it does D6 damage, and don't forget, it's a critical auto wound. Therefore, any 6s to hit means it's auto wounding, which is real nice. In combat, not too bad either. 4 attacks, hitting on a 4, which is a bit sad, but wound on a 3, rend 1 damage D3, means she could do a little bit of damage. Okay, let's talk about a couple of her abilities. First one is a passive, and it's the Mortarch of Grief. You subtract 3 from the control scores of enemy units while they're within 12, and it's not wholly within 12 inches, which I think is quite nice. And instead, it subtracts 3 from the control scores of enemy units, which I think is within 12 inches, which I think is great. And this could be very effective. Control scores are made up of your control statistic. Let's look at Lady Olynder. She has a control value of 2. If she was a unit of 5 Lady Olynders, then it would be 5 models of 2, which would equal 10, and that would mean your control score would be 10. Therefore, you subtract 3 from the control score, not the control statistic. So therefore, that's how that works. So some people have been confused by that in the YouTube comments. I'm trying to be clear about that so you can understand. So the difference between control characteristic and your final control score, your control score is the cumulative total of the control statistics plus bonuses. Okay? Nice. Okay, now she has an ability called No Rest for the Wicked, which is done once per battle in your hero phase. You pick any number of friendly Nighthaunt units on the battlefield to be the targets, so it could be all of them, and for each target, you return a number of slain models of that unit to a combined health characteristic of up to D3 plus 3. Now, one of the things this doesn't do is it doesn't also return any wounds to big multi-wound targets, like you could see in a Black Coach, like you could maybe see on the characters themselves, which I think would have been quite nice to have that as well. However, you're going to be able to return a lot of slain models. In Age of Sigmar before, this was whole models, so it was very, very effective. So it is much reduced in its efficacy, but we'll see if it ends up being really good. And then finally, she has her own spell called Grief Stricken, which is cast on a 6, and it's a range of 18 inches. You pick an enemy unit, and then that unit must ignore positive modifiers to their hit rolls, their wound rolls, and their save rolls. And that's pretty fantastic because it means they can no longer get +1 to hit if they have some sort of ability on their war scroll that gives them +1 to wound. And the fact that they can't have any bonuses to their save rolls means that's going to be able to interact really well with Rend and also the ability to reduce their save thanks to your battle trait ability, which is very nice. Okay. Now, if we go look at Reikenor the Grimhailer, who is another unique character, a level 1 wizard. It's a character mounted on haunts, and she has got 7 health. He's got 7 health, a 4-up save, and a 6-up ward save. And don't forget, is a level 1 wizard. Much faster than Olynder, moves 12 inches, still only a control value of 2. Feels like a priest and wizard assassin, which is pretty nice. Okay. It's got 5 attacks with their Fell Reaper ability, which is hits on a 3, wounds on a 3, rend 2, and damage 2. However, if the unit charges turn, you have +1 damage, so it becomes damage 3 for 15 damage in total. Also has critical auto wounds, so only 6s to hit means they're going to auto wound. But we'll jump straight down to their passive Grim Justice, which has an effect where you add 1 to hit and wound rolls if you target a priest or a wizard with that Fell Reaper ability. So if you were targeting a priest or a wizard, Fell Reaper is going to be 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, Ren 2, damage 3. And it really feels like Reikenor is going to have the possibility of assassinating, your Slans, your other types of wizards that are knocking around, and feels really good. In addition, in any hero phase, they have the ability, Reikenor's got the ability to use their corpse candles, where you pick this unit or a visible unit within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. You allocate 1 damage point to the target. If you pick the enemy unit, you add 1 to your casting rolls for the rest of the turn. If you chose the yourself or Reikenor himself, you add 1 to the casting rolls of this unit and you add 1 to their power level. What's a power level? Your power level is your casting ability that you have at the bottom. Where it says Wizard 1, that means Wizard power level 1. So that means they would become a Wizard power level 2, which is pretty good. So that's quite effective. I think a lot of people will be really excited about that. And speaking of being a wizard, he has his own unique spell called Wraithstorm, which casts on a 7. You pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches of this unit to be the target, then make a casting roll of 2d6. You inflict D3 mortal damage, and if any models are slain, you do an additional D3 mortal damage. So very effective in potentially sniping a couple of elite models, or maybe even just a couple of units out of, a 10-man screen or something like that. Now, we've had a lot of questions in the chat here about, can I use the Corpse Candles ability more than once? While we haven't, as of yet, seen any rules, while we haven't seen this yet, we have seen some information, for instance, passives and how they interact with you in the game. Specifically, units cannot be affected by more than 1 passive. You can see up here in some of our rules. We haven't seen as of yet if you can't do an ability more than once per unit. But based on how Games Workshop rules have been written in the past, I feel like that's definitely going to be true, because otherwise you could potentially do infinite mortal damage with the Corpse Candle ability. So while we haven't seen that yet put out by Games Workshop, and I feel like they maybe should have, so as to better understand these things earlier as they're showing off all these, don't get excited about doing infinite mortal damage, because I don't think that's going to happen. So I love Reikenor the Grimhailer. He's very fun. He's a wizard priest assassin who's going to run around. It feels very thematic, and I really, really like it. Next unit we're going to look at are the Dreadblade Harrows. 3 health with an armor save of 4+. I think these are going to be a unit of 2, I think. And they have a Dreadblade, which is 4 attacks, 4s and 3s, rend 1, damage 2, with, again, critical auto wound. We're seeing this across all of the Nighthaunt, so it seems like any 6s to hit on Nighthaunt is going to always auto wound as well. And in addition, has that 6-up ward save and has got fly. It's also a cavalry model, as is, I should point out, Reikenor the Grimhailer. Reikenor is going to be able to do that charge that makes you strike last, or is going to be able to do the charge that makes you have -1 to your save. In this case, with the Dreadblade Harrows, because they're cavalry, they're going to be able to do the charge that makes you -1 to your save. So effectively, they could be Ren 2 if they really wanted to. Anyway, they have 2 different abilities. The first one is Phantasmal Discorporation, which is done in any movement phase, but it has the core keyword. We'll come back to that in a minute. The effect is you remove this unit from the battlefield and set it up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. This does mean, as far as I can tell, you're going to be able to do this in your opponent's movement phase as well, which is honestly pretty interesting. That's going to add a lot of utility, I think, to how this works. Now, you're going to ask yourself, hey, Rob, does this mean I can move after? Because it doesn't say I can't. Well, no, specifically because of the core keyword. What this means is in any phase, a unit can only do 1 core ability. So what this means is you are going to be able to, in the movement phase, either move or use Phantasmal Discorporation, but not both, because both of them are core abilities. So you can only do 1 or the other, okay? But very interesting. And in your opponent's turn, you're going to be able to definitely be able to use this to teleport away and then use the countercharge mechanic, which is very fun. They also have a passive ability where the effect is Curse of Loyalty. If this unit charges this turn, you add 3 to the control scores of friendly Nighthaunt units while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Fun. Okay, that's very good, because it feels like the army might be trying to be a reduce your control score, increase their control score army, as well as a bit of a debuff army, which is quite fun. Oh my God, you say to yourself, why don't I then immediately take multiple Dreadblade Harrows? Well, because it's a passive ability, units cannot benefit from the same passive ability more than once. So you can't just keep stacking up your control score with multiple units of Dreadblade Harrows. So I apologize about that. Let me know what you think of the Dreadblade Harrow. Okay. And then finally, we have the Myrmourn Banshees, which are movement 8 inches. They're 2 health. It's a unit of 4. Just should say that. So 8 health across the whole unit with a 4-up save that's unrenderable, but they only have a control value of 1. So they're not that good for grabbing an objective. Only 2 attacks per model for 8 from the unit. Hit on a 4, which is pretty lackluster. Wounds on a 3, rend 2, damage D3. And it's those last 2 bits which make them, always a bit of a choice. Rend 2's great, especially if you're able to reduce their armor save again with the charge ability from earlier. And then D3 damage, we don't mind that either. That's pretty good as well. A lot of attacks. If you have a unit of 8 of these, this would be pretty spicy and could potentially do a lot of damage to a unit. They also have their own, they have a 6-up ward save, of course, and they fly. And they have their own special ability, which is a reaction to your opponent doing a spell ability, where a friendly Nighthaunt unit holding than 12 inches unit picked to be a target that spell, this unit can use an unbind as if it was a wizard 1. And following our kind of thoughts from earlier, you're only going to be able to do this once per turn from each different Myrmourn Banshee unit. Otherwise, you could potentially do this multiple times, which I think is interesting. You also add 1 to the unbinding roll for that ability, and if the spell is unbound, you inflict D3 mortal damage on the caster, and that's pretty nice. So I like that a lot. So let me know what you think of the Nighthaunt abilities. It feels of the past 4 that we've covered, it's quite interesting that you can't put Nighthaunt into reserve or deep strike, or at least we haven't seen any rules to do that so far. And in addition, of the 4 factions we've seen, one of them being Death, the Death faction has no recursion or no units returning from the grave sites or anything like that. In addition, we haven't seen anything like a terrain piece for these guys either. So it feels like they're really missing on what the other 3 factions have got, but they've got some really flavorful battle traits and abilities. So I think that's quite interesting. So let me know what you think. That's all I can ask from you. And if you want to join our Patreon and hang out with us, talking about loads of fun stuff, including barbecues and obviously having faction chats about these different armies, I'd love that. And it also helps to support the show, which is great. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you soon.